I'm Sabrina, 27 years old, and when I was 17, my family abandoned me with nothing but a note saying, "You'll figure it out," and $200. I cried myself to sleep for months working multiple jobs while finishing high school alone. Now I'm a millionaire through my own hard work, and guess who suddenly wants to be part of my life again? The same people who walked away without looking back. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from, and hit that like and subscribe button as I take you through the journey of how I took my family to court when they tried to claim credit for my success. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Michigan, I never imagined my life would take such a drastic turn. Our house on Maple Street was modest but comfortable with 4 bedrooms and a small backyard where we had weekend barbecues during summer. My father, Frank, worked as a sales manager at a local furniture company, while my mother, Diana, taught piano lessons from our living room. My younger brother, Jackson, and I shared typical sibling rivalries, but nothing prepared me for what was to come. Looking back, I can see the signs were there. Dad constantly checking the mail before anyone else could see it. Mom having hushed phone conversations that stopped whenever I walked into the room. The increasing tension at dinner table conversations about money. Still as a teenager focused on school friends and my part-time job at the local library, I didn't piece it all together. Jackson was always the golden child. 3 years younger than me, he was a talented baseball player who Dad believed would earn a scholarship to college. "Jackson's going places," Dad would say proudly at his games, his arm around my brother's shoulder. I'd stand slightly apart, invisible despite my straight A's and position as editor of the school newspaper. "Your brother needs more support," Mom would explain when I questioned why they never attended my debate competitions. "His games are more important right now." I accepted this as fact, never questioning the underlying message that my achievements were somehow less valuable. The week before everything changed, I noticed more whispered conversations between my parents. Boxes appeared in the garage, quickly covered with tarps when I walked in. "Just spring cleaning," Mom said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. My 17th birthday fell on a Thursday. I remember it clearly because it was unusually subdued. No extended family came over unlike previous years. Mom made my favorite chocolate cake but seemed distracted throughout the small celebration. Dad gave me a silver necklace with a tiny pendant. "Something to remember us by," he said. The comment seemed odd at the time, but I laughed it off. Jackson gave me a handmade card, his expression unreadable. Later I would wonder if he knew what was coming, if they had all planned it, rehearsed it while I remained oblivious. The next day I went to school as usual. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary when I left that morning. Mom handed me my lunch bag with her usual, "Have a good day, honey." Dad had already left for work. Jackson complained about a math test as we walked to the bus stop. When I returned home that afternoon, the house was strangely quiet. "Mom," I called out, dropping my backpack by the door as usual. No answer. Walking through the house, an eerie feeling crept over me. The living room looked normal, but something felt off. In the kitchen, I noticed the family photos were missing from the refrigerator. Opening the fridge, I saw it was nearly empty. With increasing panic, I ran upstairs. My parents' bedroom door stood open, revealing bare mattresses and empty closets. Jackson's room was similarly stripped bare. My room alone remained untouched, exactly as I'd left it that morning. On my bed sat an envelope. With shaking hands, I opened it to find $200 in cash and a note in my father's handwriting, "You'll figure it out." 4 words. That's all they left me with. 4 words and $200. I ran outside, looking up and down the street as if they might be hiding, waiting to jump out and tell me this was all some elaborate prank. Our family car was gone. The neighbors' houses stood silent, indifferent to my world collapsing. I called my father's cell phone. Disconnected. My mother's. The same. I called my father's workplace only to learn he had quit 2 weeks earlier. Information I had never been told. As darkness fell, I sat on our front porch, unable to process what had happened. Jenkins from next door walked over, concern on her face. "Are you all right, Sabrina? Where is everyone?" "They're gone," I whispered, the reality finally hitting me. "They left me." Her expression confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My family had abandoned me 17 years old with nothing but a callous note and barely enough money to last a couple of weeks. That first night alone in the empty house was the longest of my life. I curled up in my bed, still in my clothes, unable to stop the waves of shock, betrayal, and raw fear washing over me. By morning, my determination to find them had crystallized into a single thought. I would figure it out, not because they told me to, but because I had no other choice. The days following my family's disappearance blurred together in a haze of panic and disbelief. Each morning I woke hoping it had all been a terrible nightmare, only to face the silence of the half-empty house. I called every relative I could think of, but my calls went straight to voicemail or were answered with uncomfortable silences, followed by excuses. Finally, my mother's sister, Aunt Margot, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. Her face was drawn with guilt as she stirred her untouched latte. "They made us all promise not to tell you anything," she admitted, unable to meet my eyes. "Frank got a job offer in Arizona. A fresh start, he called it. They've been planning this for months." "But why leave me behind?" My voice cracked. "What did I do wrong?" Aunt Margot finally looked at me, her expression pained. "Frank said you were always the independent one, that you'd be fine on your own. They couldn't afford to take everyone, and Jackson needed their support for his baseball future." The calculation was clear. They had chosen my brother over me. I was deemed expendable, an extra mouth they couldn't or wouldn't feed. "Did anyone stand up for me? Did anyone say this was wrong?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. Her silence was answer enough. I left that meeting understanding two brutal truths: my family had methodically planned to abandon me, and no adult in my life was going to step up to help. At school, I sought out Miss Patterson, the counselor who had always shown me kindness. In her cluttered office with motivational posters on the walls, I broke down and told her everything. "If we report this to authorities, you'll likely enter the foster care system," she explained gently. "At 17, you might be bounced between temporary placements until you age out." The foster system terrified me. I'd heard enough stories about separated siblings' neglect and abuse to know I wanted to avoid that at all costs. "What if nobody knows?" I suggested, desperation making my voice shake. "What if I just tell everyone my parents are traveling for work and I'm staying alone? I turn 18 in 11 months. Ms. Patterson looked troubled. "That would be very difficult, Sabrina. How would you pay the bills? The mortgage?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. When I called the bank, I discovered the house had been sold weeks ago with a 30-day grace period before the new owners would take possession. My parents had timed their departure perfectly, leaving me just before eviction. With Miss Patterson's reluctant guidance, I crafted a plan. I would tell everyone my parents were away temporarily for work. I would find a cheap apartment and jobs to support myself while finishing high school. She agreed to serve as my emergency contact and helped me navigate the paperwork needed to stay enrolled in school. Finding affordable housing proved nearly impossible on my non-existent budget. After days of searching, I found a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat on the edge of town. The monthly rent would consume most of what I could earn, but it was my only option. I landed 2 part-time jobs, morning shifts at Green Street Cafe before school, and evening shifts at Randall's Grocery after classes. Between the two, I worked nearly 40 hours a week while maintaining my course load. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. The practical challenges were overwhelming. I had no car and relied on public transportation, often walking miles in Michigan winter weather when buses ran late. I learned to budget every penny, surviving on cafe leftovers and discounted groceries approaching their expiration dates. The physical exhaustion, however, paled in comparison to the emotional toll. Each night in my tiny apartment, the reality of my situation would crash over me anew. My family hadn't just moved away, they had methodically planned to erase me from their lives. The knowledge hollowed me out from the inside. Nightmares plagued my rare hours of sleep. I dreamed of chasing my family through endless hallways, always glimpsing them turning corners, but never able to catch up. I'd wake gasping, my pillow wet with tears. Trust became impossible. Each kind gesture from coworkers or classmates triggered suspicion. What did they really want? When would they leave too? I built walls around myself, keeping everyone at arm's length. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. There were days I could barely force myself out of bed, dragging myself through shifts and classes on autopilot. The future stretched ahead bleak and uncertain. I was surviving, but just barely. One particularly difficult evening, after being shortchanged on my grocery store paycheck and missing the last bus home, I sat on a park bench in the rain, too exhausted to cry. A simple question echoed in my mind: why wasn't I worth keeping? That question would haunt me for years to come, shaping my decisions in ways I couldn't yet understand. But in that moment, sitting alone in the rain, I made a promise to myself. I would not just survive this. Somehow I would find a way to thrive. Not to prove anything to the family who discarded me, but to prove to myself that I was worth fighting for, even if no one else thought so. Little did I know that this rock-bottom moment would become the foundation upon which I would build an entirely new life. The months passed in a grueling routine of work, school, and more work. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained my grades, clinging to education as my only possible ticket to a better future. When graduation day arrived, I sat among my peers in my borrowed cap and gown, scanning the audience out of habit, before remembering there would be no proud parents taking photos of me. Ms. Patterson came to the ceremony, her kind face the only one there for me. She presented me with a small silver frame for my diploma and a gift card to a local restaurant. "I'm so proud of you, Sabrina," she said, hugging me tightly. "What you've accomplished despite everything is remarkable." Her validation meant more than she could know. In the absence of family, I'd begun collecting these small moments of connection, like precious stones, holding them close when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me. With high school behind me, I increased my hours at both jobs, saving every possible dollar for community college. My plan was to study business while continuing to work, taking the minimum number of credits I could afford each semester. The Green Street Cafe where I worked mornings was owned by a woman named Elaine Morgan. In her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp green eyes, she ran her business with precision and warmth. I'd always admired her confidence and work ethic, but we rarely spoke beyond daily operational matters. One morning, as I balanced on a stepladder cleaning the cafe's high windows, I overheard her on the phone discussing a property renovation. "The contractor wants $15,000 over budget, which kills my profit margin," she was saying, frustration evident in her voice. "I'll need to find someone else." When she hung up, I couldn't help commenting, "Have you looked into doing some of the cosmetic work yourself? I've been watching renovation videos online, and it seems like things like painting and basic tiling could save thousands." Elaine looked at me with surprise. "You're interested in renovation work?" I shrugged, embarrassed by my boldness. "I'm interested in saving money. When you have almost none, you get creative." Something in her expression shifted. For the first time, she really looked at me not just as an employee, but as a person. "Join me for lunch today," she said. It wasn't a question. Over sandwiches in her small office, Elaine asked about my background and plans. Something about her direct gaze made lying impossible. I found myself telling her everything: the abandonment, my struggle to stay afloat, my dreams of financial security. "So you've been completely on your own since 17? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, ma'am." "And you still graduated with honors while working 2 jobs?" I nodded, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Remarkable," she said simply. Then, "I own 7 properties in this city, mostly small commercial spaces and a few residential units. I started with nothing 15 years ago after my divorce left me nearly bankrupt." She pulled out a folder and spread photos across her desk. Before and after shots of various buildings, a dilapidated storefront transformed into a charming bookshop, a rundown house now an attractive duplex. "Real estate saved me," she continued, "but I'm getting older and renovation work is getting harder. I need someone with energy, intelligence, and hunger to learn." My heart raced as I began to understand what she was suggesting. "I can teach you everything I know about property investment and renovation," she said. "In return, you help me with the physical work on my upcoming projects. You'd earn more than you do as a barista with flexible hours around your classes." The offer seemed too good to be true. "Why would you do this for me?" Elaine's expression softened slightly. "Someone did it for me once. Besides, you remind me of myself at your age. Determined, resourceful." She paused. "Too stubborn to fail." That conversation changed the trajectory of my life. While continuing part-time at the cafe, I began apprenticing with Elaine on her properties. She taught me everything: how to identify undervalued properties, estimate renovation costs, work with contractors, and maximize return on investment. More importantly, she showed me how to negotiate, stand my ground, and command respect in male-dominated spaces. "Never apologize for taking up space," she would say when I shrank from confrontation. "You belong in every room you enter." For months, I soaked up knowledge like a sponge while saving every penny possible. I lived on ramen noodles and cafe leftovers, walked miles to avoid bus fare, and wore the same few outfits until they frayed. Every sacrifice was an investment in my future. After a year of working with Elaine, she approached me with an opportunity. A small, dilapidated house had come on the market for an estate sale. The location was good, but the property needed extensive work. "It's time," she said, showing me the listing. "This could be your first investment." The asking price was $48,000, almost exactly what I had managed to save. Putting everything into one property terrified me. What if I fail? I asked, the fear of ending up truly homeless again making my voice shake. Elaine looked me in the eye. "Then you'll figure it out," she said unknowingly, echoing my parents' cruel note. But coming from her, the words carried a different meaning. Not abandonment, but confidence in my resilience. I bought the house. For 3 exhausting months, I worked my regular jobs during the day and renovated at night. I learned to replace drywall, install flooring, and paint like a professional. I slept on a mattress on the floor of the half-finished house to save time commuting. There were moments of despair when the work seemed endless, or when I discovered additional problems hiding behind walls. During one particularly bad day when I found extensive water damage that depleted my contingency budget, I sat on the dusty floor and cried, wondering if I had made a catastrophic mistake. But each morning I got up and continued. Tile by tile, wall by wall, the house transformed under my hands. When I finally listed it for sale at $89,000, it sold within a week for $95,000. My first property had nearly doubled my investment. The profit became seed money for the next project, and with Elaine's continued mentorship, I bought a duplex that needed less cosmetic work, but smart reconfiguration of the layout. By the time I turned 20, I had formed my own LLC, Resilient Properties, and completed 4 successful renovations. Each project built my confidence along with my bank account. I began taking business courses at the community college, applying what I learned immediately to my growing company. Looking back at that period of intense work and learning, I realized it wasn't just houses I was renovating. With each property transformed, I was rebuilding myself stronger and more resilient than before. 3 years passed in a blur of properties, renovations, and growing success. By 23, my portfolio had expanded beyond single-family homes to include small apartment buildings and mixed-use properties. What had begun as a survival strategy had evolved into a thriving business with a distinct philosophy. I discovered my passion lay in seeing potential where others saw only decay. The forgotten buildings I transformed mirrored my own journey from abandoned teenager to self-sufficient businesswoman. Each renovation became more ambitious, incorporating sustainable materials and energy-efficient systems that increased both value and positive impact. My breakthrough came when I purchased an abandoned warehouse in a neglected part of town. Most developers avoided the area, but I saw opportunity in its proximity to the river and the new tech campus being built nearby. For this project, I needed an architect who shared my vision. Through a business networking event, I met James Harrington, a talented architect with a passion for adaptive reuse of historic buildings. Tall, with thoughtful brown eyes and a quiet confidence, James brought technical expertise and creative solutions to complement my practical experience. "Most developers would gut this place and start over," he said during our first walkthrough of the cavernous, graffiti-covered space. "But these exposed brick walls and timber beams have character you can't recreate." We spent hours discussing possibilities: loft apartments with soaring ceilings, ground floor retail spaces with restored original storefronts, a rooftop garden producing fresh vegetables for the cafe I envisioned in the corner space. Working with James pushed me to think bigger, to see beyond immediate profit to the lasting impact of thoughtful development. Our professional relationship quickly became the most fulfilling partnership I'd experienced. We challenged each other, sometimes argued passionately about design decisions, but always arrived at solutions that honored both the building's history and its future potential. The warehouse project took 18 months to complete, triple the time of any previous renovation. I invested nearly everything I had, plus secured my first major business loan. The stress was immense, with countless sleepless nights worrying about timelines and budgets. When River Lofts finally opened, the response exceeded all expectations. The 20 residential units sold within weeks, and the commercial spaces had waiting lists of local businesses wanting to lease. The project was featured in design magazines and a regional business journal, bringing unexpected attention to my work. Most gratifying was the community's response. At the grand opening, a longtime resident approached me with tears in her eyes. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years and watched it decline," she said. "I never thought I'd see it come back to life like this. Thank you for seeing its worth when others didn't." Her words resonated deeply with me. Worth. Something I had questioned about myself since finding that callous note on my bed 6 years earlier. The River Lofts project tripled my initial investment and established Resilient Properties as an innovative force in regional development. With my newfound financial security came the ability to expand my team beyond contractors to include full-time employees, a property manager, an office administrator, and a marketing coordinator. Leading a team presented new challenges. Having spent years relying only on myself, delegating didn't come naturally. I had to learn to trust others with aspects of my business, to communicate my vision clearly, and to accept that mistakes would happen. By 24, my net worth crossed the $1 million threshold. The milestone passed without celebration, as I was deep in negotiations for a historic theater building that would become my most ambitious project yet. Only later, reviewing quarterly financial statements with my newly hired accountant, did the reality sink in. "Congratulations," he said, pointing to the bottom line figure. "You're officially a millionaire." That night, alone in my loft apartment above my office, I opened a bottle of champagne. Sitting on my balcony overlooking the city, I thought about the frightened 17-year-old girl I had been wondering how she would survive her next day, let alone build a future. "We figured it out," I whispered to her memory, raising my glass to the night sky. With financial security came the space to address the emotional wounds I'd been too busy surviving to properly heal. On Elaine's recommendation, I began seeing Dr. Walker, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became sacred time for unpacking the abandonment that had shaped so much of my adult life. "You've built remarkable external success," Dr. Walker noted during one session. "But I'm concerned about your relationships. You keep everyone at a professional distance." She was right. Despite working closely with many people, I had few genuine friendships and no romantic relationships. Trust remained my greatest struggle. Each time someone came too close, alarm bells rang in my mind, warning of inevitable betrayal. "Your family's abandonment wasn't a reflection of your worth," Dr. Walker reminded me often. "It was a reflection of their limitations, their failures, not yours." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, accepting it proved harder. But with time and consistent work, I began forming deeper connections. James moved from colleague to friend as we continued collaborating on projects. Elaine remained my mentor, but also became a maternal figure who never missed celebrating my birthdays or achievements. I created a scholarship fund for teens aging out of foster care or facing family abandonment, providing not just financial support, but mentorship in practical life skills. Working with these young people, whose experiences echoed my own, became deeply fulfilling, a way to transform my pain into purpose. As my business continued expanding and my emotional healing progressed, I believed I had successfully closed the chapter on my family's abandonment. I was wrong. The past wasn't finished with me yet. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I came home to an empty house and a forward note. 7 years of complete silence from the people who raised me for 17 years, then discarded me when I became inconvenient. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon as I reviewed plans for converting an old school building into affordable senior housing. the notification popped up on my phone, the sender's name causing my heart to stutter. Jackson Williams. My brother. The golden child they had chosen to keep. Subject line, need to talk. For several minutes, I just stared at the notification, unable to open it. My carefully constructed life suddenly felt fragile, as though his name alone could collapse everything I'd built. In my office, surrounded by awards and evidence of my success, I was instantly 17 again, holding that cruel note with shaking hands. Dr. Walker had prepared me for this possibility during our sessions. One day they might reach out, she had warned. You'll need to decide in advance what boundaries you want to maintain. I had always imagined I would delete any message without reading it, protecting myself from reopening old wounds. But now, faced with the reality, curiosity overrode caution. Taking a deep breath, I opened the email. Sabrina, I know it's been a long time and you probably hate us. I wouldn't blame you. What Mom and Dad did to you was wrong. I was too young to stop it, but I've carried the guilt ever since. I found you through that article about your Riverlofts project. You've done amazing things. I always knew you would. The thing is, we're in trouble. Mom has breast cancer. Stage 3. The treatments aren't covered by insurance and Dad lost his job last year. They're about to lose the house in Arizona. I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. Could we talk maybe on the phone or video call? I know it's a lot to ask after everything, but we need help. About $50,000 would cover Mom's medical bills and keep them from becoming homeless. Whatever you decide, I want you to know I'm sorry for my part in what happened. Jackson. The email unleashed a tsunami of emotions: shock at the news of my mother's illness, anger at the audacity of asking for money, curiosity about their lives, and underneath it all, a shameful flicker of satisfaction that they were struggling while I thrived. I closed my laptop and canceled my remaining meetings for the day. Driving aimlessly around the city, I eventually found myself at the riverfront park, where James and I often discussed project ideas. The familiar setting helped calm my racing thoughts. For 7 years, I had imagined confronting my family, delivering the perfect cutting speech that would make them understand the magnitude of what they'd done. Now that the opportunity presented itself, I found myself uncertain. Would helping them bring closure? Or would it just reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal? $50,000 was an amount I could easily afford now, but that wasn't the point. The money represented something far more complex. I called Dr. Walker and scheduled an emergency session for that evening. In her comfortable office with its soft lighting and calming blue walls, I showed her Jackson's email. "What do you want to do?" she asked after reading it. "Not what you think you should do, but what you want." "Part of me wants to see them," I admitted. "To show them I survived, thrived, even despite them abandoning me. Another part never wants to see their faces again." "Both reactions are completely valid," she assured me. "Remember, you have all the power in this situation. You can set the terms of any interaction." After much reflection, I decided to respond to Jackson. Not with an immediate yes or no about financial help, but with an agreement to a video call. I needed to see them to gauge their sincerity before making any decisions. The video call was scheduled for the following Sunday evening. I prepared meticulously, choosing a neutral backdrop in my home office that revealed nothing personal. I wore a simple but expensive blouse, my success visible but understated. Most importantly, I rehearsed maintaining emotional boundaries, determined not to let them see how deeply their actions had affected me. When their faces appeared on my screen, the years fell away. My father Frank had aged considerably, his once dark hair now completely gray, deep lines etched around his eyes. My mother Diana looked thin and pale, a colorful scarf wrapped around her head, suggesting the hair loss of chemotherapy. Jackson, now 24, had the same eyes I remembered, though his face had matured. For a moment, nobody spoke. I had imagined this reunion countless times, but the reality of seeing them rendered me temporarily speechless. "Sabrina," my mother finally said, her voice catching. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. "I understand you're facing some difficulties." My father leaned forward. "We've had a rough couple of years. The company I was working for went bankrupt, and then Diana's diagnosis came. He ran a hand through his thinned hair. "We've exhausted our savings on treatments. The house is in foreclosure." "I see," I said, fighting to keep my expression composed. "And now you need my help." "We wouldn't ask if we had anywhere else to turn," my mother said. "Your business seems to be doing very well." There was something in her tone that set off warning bells. Not gratitude or remorse, but something closer to entitlement. "How did you know about my business?" I asked. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "I've been following your progress online. Those articles about your development projects, the interviews." My father jumped in his voice, taking on the sales pitch quality I remembered from childhood. "You've done amazingly well for yourself, Sabrina. We always knew you would. You were always so independent, so capable." The implication hit me like a physical blow. They were trying to rewrite history to frame their abandonment as some kind of tough love that had led to my success. "Are you suggesting," I said slowly, "that abandoning me with $200 and a note was somehow for my benefit?" "We were desperate," my mother said defensively. "We couldn't support everyone. We knew you'd figure it out." "You were right about that," I replied, my voice hardening. "I did figure it out, without any help from my family." "And look at you now," my father exclaimed, gesturing vaguely at my image on his screen. "A successful businesswoman. We're proud of what you've accomplished." The audacity of his statement stole my breath. Proud, after contributing nothing but trauma to my journey. "I need to be clear about something," I said when I could trust my voice again. "My success came despite what you did not because of it. You didn't teach me independence. You taught me that I was disposable." Uncomfortable silence followed my statement. Jackson looked genuinely pained, but my parents' expressions showed more annoyance than remorse. "The past is the past," my father finally said with a dismissive wave. "We're family. Family helps each other in times of need." His words crystallized everything for me. In their minds, family was a one-way street. They could discard me when convenient, then invoke family ties when they needed something. "I'll need time to think about this," I said, unwilling to commit to anything while emotions ran high. "I'll be in touch." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. The reunion had gone nothing like I expected. Instead of apologies or genuine remorse, they had attempted to gaslight me into believing their abandonment was somehow a favor. The experience left me shaken but also strangely clear-headed. That night, I made a decision. Before offering any financial help, I needed to verify their claims and understand exactly what I might be getting into. The businesswoman in me knew better than to make emotional decisions with large sums of money. The wounded daughter in me needed protection from potential further manipulation. The next morning, I contacted a private investigator recommended by my attorney. If I was going to face my past, I needed to do it with my eyes fully open, armed with facts rather than emotions. The private investigator's report arrived 2 weeks later, a comprehensive document detailing my family's activities since their disappearance from my life. Reading it in the solitude of my office, each revelation hit like a physical blow, confirming suspicions I had tried to dismiss as paranoia. My mother's cancer diagnosis was real, though the investigator noted her social media posts suggested her condition was responding well to treatment. My father had indeed lost his job, but through his own misconduct rather than company bankruptcy as he'd claimed. Their financial troubles were genuine, though exacerbated by consistently living beyond their means. Most disturbing were the social media posts and community newspaper clippings where my parents had openly discussed their daughter, the successful developer. In a local Arizona business networking group, my father had claimed he taught her everything she knows about property investment. My mother had told her cancer support group that our family's real estate business was thriving under my management, implying ongoing involvement and support that had never existed. They hadn't just abandoned me, they were actively lying about their role in my life and success. As I processed this information, my office phone rang. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Williams, there's a Jackson Williams here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment but says it's urgent." My brother was here in person. The surprise nearly made me decline the meeting, but curiosity won out. "Send him in, please." Jackson entered my office tentatively, his expression a mix of anxiety and awe as he took in the awards on my walls, the view of the city from my windows. He looked both familiar and like a stranger, this grown man who had once been the little brother I protected from playground bullies. "Nice office," he said awkwardly, hovering near the door. "Thank you. It was unexpected to receive your email and even more unexpected to see you in person. What brings you here?" He sank into the chair across from my desk. "Mom's condition is getting worse. The doctors want to try an experimental treatment, but the insurance won't cover it. Dad's still unemployed and they're getting eviction notices. They sent me because—" He trailed off, looking ashamed. "Because they thought I'd be more likely to give money to you than to them directly." I finished for him. He nodded miserably. "They need an answer. Things are desperate." "Are they?" I asked, sliding the investigator's report across the desk. "Because according to this mom's latest social media posts, talk about her cancer responding well to treatment, and Dad has been telling people he's consulting, not unemployed." Jackson's face flushed. "They exaggerate sometimes, but the financial problems are real, I swear." "What about the claims that they supported my business, that Dad taught me everything I know about real estate?" His eyes widened in genuine surprise. "They say that, frequently it seems, they've created quite an elaborate fiction about their ongoing role in my life." Jackson's shoulders slumped. "I didn't know. I've tried to distance myself from them the past few years, live my own life. The guilt over what happened to you, it's always been between us." For the first time, I felt a flicker of connection to my brother. "You were 14, Jackson. What could you have done?" "I could have reached out sooner, told you the truth." He met my eyes directly. "They told me we had to leave you behind because there wasn't enough money for all of us. I believed them until I found letters from Dad's sister offering to help financially if they'd bring you to Arizona too. They chose to leave you." His revelation shouldn't have hurt after all this time, but it did. The confirmation that I had been discarded by choice, not necessity, reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because despite everything, they're still our parents. Mom is sick even if she's exaggerating how bad it is. And He hesitated. "I thought maybe this could be a chance for some kind of closure for all of us." The word closure resonated with me. Wasn't that what I'd been seeking through years of therapy? But closure didn't necessarily mean reunion or forgiveness. Sometimes it meant final acknowledgement of a painful truth. "I need to think about this," I told him. "Where are you staying while you're in town?" "Budget motel on Franklin Street. I spent most of my savings on the plane ticket." I wrote him a check for $500. "For your expenses while you're here. No strings attached. I'll let you know my decision about Mom and Dad soon." After Jackson left, I called James. Over the years, he had transitioned from colleague to friend to something not quite defined but increasingly important. He was the only person besides Dr. Walker who knew the full story of my family history. We met at our favorite spot by the river, where the conversion of an old boathouse into a community arts center was our latest joint project. As we walked along the waterfront, I told him about Jackson's visit and the investigators' findings. "What are you thinking of doing?" James asked, his steady presence calming my turbulent thoughts. "Part of me wants to help because despite everything, I don't want my mother to suffer if her cancer really is worsening. Another part thinks giving them money would just enable more lies and manipulation." "Those both sound like reasonable perspectives," he said. "What does your gut tell you?" I stopped walking, watching the sunset reflect on the river's surface. That whatever I decide needs to be on my terms, not theirs. That I need to protect myself first. James nodded. "Then trust that instinct. You've built an incredible life by trusting yourself." His quiet confidence in me strengthened my resolve. By the time I returned to my office the next morning, I had a plan. I called my attorney to discuss options, then contacted Jackson to arrange another meeting. 2 days later, we met in a conference room at my attorney's office. I had invited Jackson alone, not our parents. He arrived looking nervous, glancing between me and my attorney with apprehension. "Am I in trouble?" he asked as he took a seat. "No," I assured him. Trevor is here because what I'm about to propose has legal implications, and I want everything properly documented. I laid out my terms. I would establish a medical fund for our mother's treatments paid directly to healthcare providers, not to our parents. I would also help with 6 months of housing costs to prevent immediate homelessness, again paid directly to their landlord or mortgage company. In exchange, I continued, they must publicly retract any statements implying they supported my business or had any involvement in my success after I turned 17. And they must sign legally binding agreements never to make such claims again. Jackson looked relieved but confused. That's generous, but why the legal agreements? Because words matter, I explained. They abandoned me physically 7 years ago. I won't let them rewrite that history for their benefit now. As Jackson considered my offer, my phone buzzed with a news alert. It was from a business journal in Arizona featuring an interview with Frank Williams about his daughter's real estate empire and how he had mentored her from the beginning. I showed Jackson the article, watching his face fall as he read our father's blatant lies. I had no idea he was doing this, Jackson whispered. It's like he's living in an alternate reality. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was my assistant, her voice unusually tense. Ms. Williams, there's a man in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He's saying he's your father and that he has a right to speak with his daughter. Security is with him, but he's becoming agitated. Ice flooded my veins. My father was here. How had he found my office? Tell security I'll be right down, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Turning to Jackson, I asked, Did you tell them where my office is? He shook his head, looking genuinely shocked. They must have followed me yesterday. I'm so sorry, Sabrina. Together with my attorney, we took the elevator to the lobby. The scene that greeted us was chaotic. My father, looking disheveled and angry, was gesturing wildly at the security guards blocking his path to the elevators. A small crowd of employees and visitors had gathered, watching the disturbance. There she is, he shouted when he spotted me. My daughter, the big success story. Tell them who I am. Sabrina? The public confrontation was my nightmare scenario, my private trauma exposed for strangers to witness. But 7 years of building myself from nothing had given me strength I hadn't possessed at 17. Sir, I said calmly, addressing him as I would any stranger, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. Don't you sir me, he bellowed. I'm your father, the man who taught you everything you know about business. The last statement pushed me from calm to cold fury. Mr. Williams, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent lobby. We both know that's not true. You abandoned me when I was 17 years old with $200 and a note. You have taught me nothing except how not to treat people I claim to love. His face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we did for you, we knew you'd be fine on your own. And look at you now, too good to help your own family. Jackson stepped forward. Dad, stop. This isn't helping anything. My father rounded on him. You too. After I sent you here to get her money, you're both against me now. His inadvertent admission that he had sent Jackson specifically to get her money hung in the air. Jackson's face crumpled in shame. My attorney intervened. Mr. Williams, I'm Ms. Williams' legal counsel. I strongly advise you to leave now before we contact the police. Police? My father scoffed. For what? Visiting my daughter, I have rights. You forfeited those rights when you abandoned your minor child, Trevor replied coolly. That's child abandonment, a criminal offense in Michigan. The statute of limitations hasn't expired should Ms. Williams wish to press charges. The mention of criminal charges seemed to penetrate my father's anger. His face paled slightly. Furthermore, Trevor continued, your public claims about involvement in Ms. Williams' business constitute defamation and could result in significant civil penalties. Security had moved closer during this exchange, ready to escort my father out. For a moment, I thought he might become physically aggressive, but instead he seemed to deflate. You've changed, he said, looking at me with something like surprise. You're not the same girl. No, I agreed quietly. I'm not. And I have you to thank for that in a way. Now please leave before this becomes a legal matter. As security led him toward the exit, he called over his shoulder, "This isn't over. We're still family whether you like it or not." Once he was gone, the lobby slowly returned to normal activity, though I could feel curious glances following me. Jackson stood frozen mortification evident in his posture. "I had no idea he would do that," he whispered. "I knew he was desperate, but this—" "It's not your fault," I assured him, though my hands were shaking with delayed adrenaline. "But I think it's clear my original offer needs reconsideration." Back in my office, I called Dr. Walker for an emergency phone session needing her guidance to process the public confrontation with my father. With her help, I realized the incident had crystallized something important. My parents' entitlement and manipulation weren't just past wounds, but present dangers to my well-being and reputation. Later that afternoon, I received calls from two business associates who had witnessed the scene in the lobby. Both expressed concern about my father's claims regarding my company. By evening, I discovered social media posts in local business groups discussing the incident, some questioning my business practices based on my father's assertions. The situation had escalated from personal pain to professional threat. My carefully built reputation was now at risk because of my family's lies. When Jackson called that evening to apologize again for our father's behavior, I had reached a difficult decision. "I can't offer financial help under these circumstances," I told him. "Not when they're actively threatening my business and reputation." "I understand," he said, sounding defeated. "What will you do now?" "What I should have done years ago," I replied. "I'm going to stand up for myself legally. My attorney will be filing a cease and desist order regarding their false claims about my business." The line went quiet for a moment before Jackson spoke again. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, and I want you to know I'm not part of their schemes. I genuinely thought I was helping our mother get medical care." I believed him. The manipulated son was almost as much a victim as the abandoned daughter. I know Jackson, and if you ever want to build a relationship separate from them, I'd be open to that. It was the first time I had offered any familial connection, and his choked "thank you" suggested it meant more than any financial help could have. The following week was a whirlwind of legal consultations and damage control for my business. My attorney filed the cease and desist orders, but my parents responded by doubling down, giving an interview to a local Arizona newspaper about their ungrateful daughter, who refused to help during a health crisis. The story began gaining traction in business circles, with potential investors questioning my character based on the one-sided narrative my parents were spreading. What had begun as personal pain was now threatening everything I had built. After careful consideration and consultation with my legal team, I made the difficult decision to file a defamation lawsuit against my parents, along with a counterclaim for the emotional and financial damages of their child abandonment years earlier. It wasn't about money. It was about truth. About finally standing up to the people who had discarded me and were now trying to profit from false narratives about my success. If they wanted to make our family drama public, then let the full truth come out in court, documented and on record for all to see. The decision to take my family to court wasn't made lightly, but it felt like the only path to true closure. After years of rebuilding myself from the broken pieces they left behind, I was finally strong enough to face them on my terms, in a forum where truth, not manipulation, would prevail. The months leading up to the court date were among the most challenging of my life. Preparing for the case meant revisiting every painful detail of my abandonment, documenting the struggle of those early months alone, gathering evidence of my parents' recent defamatory claims. Each affidavit and exhibit was another wound reopened, another memory I had tried to bury, now exposed to scrutiny. Dr. Walker increased our sessions to twice weekly, providing crucial support as I navigated both the legal process and the emotional fallout. "Remember," she reminded me often, "this isn't just about the past. It's about protecting your present and future." My legal team constructed a meticulous case. Ms. Patterson provided a sworn statement about my circumstances after being abandoned. Neighbors from my childhood street testified about the family's sudden disappearance, leaving me behind. Elaine documented my complete lack of family support or resources when she first met me. On the defamation side, we collected dozens of instances where my parents had falsely claimed involvement in my business social media posts, community newspaper articles, statements to business associates. The evidence painted a clear picture of systematic attempts to capitalize on my success through lies. As the court date approached, my anxiety intensified. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office and on construction sites, pushing my body to exhaustion so my mind might rest at night. James became my steadfast support, bringing meals when I forgot to eat, providing silent companionship when words failed me. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, my armor for the battle ahead. James drove me to the courthouse, his steady presence a counterweight to my nerves. "Whatever happens in there," he said as we pulled into the parking lot, "you've already won by standing up for yourself. Remember that." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, its wooden benches and formal atmosphere both intimidating and reassuring. My parents sat on the opposite side with their attorney, a harried-looking man with disorganized files spread before him. My mother appeared frailer than on our video call, the effects of her cancer treatments evident in her thin frame and pallid complexion. My father looked diminished somehow, his bluster replaced by nervous fidgeting. Jackson sat in the gallery, positioned exactly halfway between our opposing sides, his loyalty visibly torn. Judge Ramirez, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked dark hair, called the court to order. The formality of the proceedings felt surreal after years of carrying this pain privately. Now strangers would hear the story of my abandonment, would judge the actions of the people who should have protected me. My attorney presented our case first, methodically laying out the facts of my abandonment at 17, the struggle to survive alone, and the recent defamatory statements that threatened my hard-built business and reputation. Ms. Patterson's testimony was particularly moving. "Sabrina was one of the most promising students I'd ever worked with," she told the court, her voice steady but emotional. "When she came to my office and told me her family had simply left her behind, I was stunned. No teenager should have to navigate that kind of betrayal alone." Elaine described finding me working multiple jobs while attending community college with no family support system. "She never asked for handouts," Elaine testified. "She wanted opportunity and was willing to work harder than anyone I'd ever seen to create a future for herself." Throughout these testimonies, I kept my expression composed, though inside I was that terrified 17-year-old again, reading the callous note and realizing I was truly alone. When my parents' attorney presented their defense, it was as disorganized as their lives. They claimed financial desperation had forced them to make the difficult decision to leave me behind that they had always intended to send for me once they were established. They portrayed me as the unreasonable party unwilling to help family in medical crisis out of petty grudges. Their narrative began unraveling under cross-examination. Bank records showed they had withdrawn over $10,000 just before abandoning me, not the desperate circumstances they claimed. Emails between them and relatives revealed discussions about leaving me behind because I was independent enough to manage, and they wanted to focus resources on Jackson's baseball future. The most damning evidence came from their own recent communications. Social media messages and emails where they discussed how to leverage Sabrina's success and claims that they had been guiding her business decisions from afar exposed the calculated nature of their current attempts to insert themselves into my life. When my father took the stand, his testimony oscillated between self-pity and hostility. "We did what we had to do," he insisted. "And look how well she turned out. She should be thanking us for teaching her self-reliance." Judge Ramirez interrupted him. "Mr. Williams, are you suggesting that abandoning your minor child was some form of education?" His response sent murmurs through the courtroom. "Sometimes tough love is the best teacher. She obviously learned the lesson well. Now she has millions while her mother struggles with cancer." The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Williams, this court does not recognize child abandonment as a form of tough love. It recognizes it as a crime." My mother's testimony was more subdued, focused on her medical condition and their financial struggles. When asked directly about leaving me behind at 17, she became evasive. "We thought she would contact relatives. We didn't think she'd be completely alone." Did you inform any relatives that you were leaving your daughter? My attorney asked. Well, no, but we assumed she would reach out. So you abandoned your minor child without ensuring she had any support system in place. Her silence was answer enough. The most surprising testimony came from Jackson, who had been called by my attorney. Looking uncomfortable but determined, he described the family dynamics before and after my abandonment. My parents always treated Sabrina differently, he testified. They put all their focus on my baseball career while expecting her to be completely self-sufficient. After we moved to Arizona, they rarely mentioned her. When I asked about her, they'd change the subject or say she was doing fine on her own. It wasn't until I was older that I realized how wrong what they did was. His honest testimony visibly angered our parents, whose expressions darkened as he spoke. But his words seemed to affect Judge Ramirez, who nodded thoughtfully as he described the family's dysfunction. After 2 grueling days of testimony, Judge Ramirez retired to consider her ruling. Those hours of waiting were excruciating my mind, replaying every painful moment exposed in court. James sat beside me in the courthouse corridor, his solid presence anchoring me as anxiety threatened to overwhelm my carefully maintained composure. When we were called back into the courtroom, Judge Ramirez's expression gave nothing away. She looked first at my parents, then at me before delivering her verdict. This court has rarely seen such a clear case of parental abandonment followed by attempted exploitation. She began her tone, leaving no doubt about her findings. The evidence shows that Frank and Diana Williams deliberately abandoned their 17-year-old daughter without adequate provision for her care or supervision. This abandonment constitutes child neglect under Michigan law. She continued addressing the defamation claims. Furthermore, the defendants have engaged in a pattern of false statements regarding their relationship with and contributions to Ms. Williams's business success statements that were made with knowledge of their falsity and with intent to benefit from her hard-earned reputation. The ruling was comprehensive. My parents were found liable for both the abandonment and defamation claims. The judge ordered them to make public retractions of all false statements about their involvement in my business. She granted an injunction preventing them from making any future claims about contributions to my success. Financial damages were awarded for the defamation, though I had already decided any monetary award would go directly to my scholarship foundation for abandoned teens. Most importantly, the court officially recognized the truth that I had been wrongfully abandoned and had built my success entirely on my own merits, without family support or resources. As the judge concluded the proceedings, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The truth had been spoken, documented, made official. My story could no longer be rewritten by those who had caused the pain in the first place. Outside the courtroom, Jackson approached me tentatively. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. For everything. You testified honestly, I told him. That's all I ever wanted, the truth. What happens now? He asked. With us, I mean. I considered his question carefully. I'm open to building a relationship separate from our parents, but it would need to be based on honesty and respect for boundaries. He nodded, understanding the measured nature of my offer. I'd like that. And I want you to know I'm moving out of their house next month, getting my own place, my own life. That sounds like a good start, I said, feeling the first tentative hope for some form of family connection that wouldn't threaten my hard-won peace. My parents made no attempt to speak with me as they left the courthouse, their expressions a mixture of defeat and lingering resentment. My mother cast a last glance back, something unreadable in her eyes, before my father ushered her through the doors. I felt nothing watching them leave, not satisfaction, not anger, just a quiet certainty that this chapter was finally closing. In the weeks following the court case, I threw myself into expanding my scholarship foundation, channeling the closure I'd gained into helping others facing similar challenges. The work became healing, transforming my personal pain into something constructive and hopeful. My relationship with James deepened, moving beyond friendship and professional collaboration into something more intimate and trusting. With him, I began learning that vulnerability could be strength, not weakness, and that letting someone close didn't mean they would inevitably leave. Elaine, proud as any parent could be, hosted a celebration dinner after the court case, raising a toast to facing the past and building the future. The gathering, James, Dr. Walker, Ms. Patterson, and a few close friends who had supported me through the legal battle felt like what family should be: chosen, supportive, honest. 1 year after the court case, I stood at the podium at the opening of Resilient House, a transitional living facility for teens aging out of foster care or facing family abandonment. The renovated apartment building offered not just housing, but comprehensive support services, job training, and mentorship. Looking out at the gathered community members, supporters, and the first group of teens who would live there, I felt a sense of peace I had searched for since finding that note on my bed a decade earlier. 10 years ago, I was abandoned by the people who should have protected me. I began, my voice steady and clear. I stood alone, terrified of what would come next. Today, I want to ensure no young person faces that journey without support. In the audience, Jackson sat beside James, both watching with evident pride. Our relationship was still evolving, cautious but genuine. He had moved to the city 6 months earlier, working in construction management and joining me occasionally for coffee or dinner, building a sibling bond neither of us had experienced in childhood. What I learned through my journey wasn't that I didn't need others, I continued. It was that we all need connection, support, and community to thrive. Being strong doesn't mean standing alone. It means building networks of care and opportunity that lift everyone. As I spoke, I realized how far I had come from that abandoned girl clutching a cruel note. The path had been unimaginably difficult, but it had led me to create something meaningful, something that might spare others the pain I had experienced. True resilience isn't just about surviving trauma, I concluded. It's about transforming it into purpose, into connection, into a future built on your own terms. That's what I wish for each young person who comes through these doors. The journey from abandonment to this moment had shaped every aspect of my life. The note that once defined me, "You'll figure it out," no longer carried sting. I had figured it out not because they forced me to, but because of an inner strength they could neither claim credit for nor diminish. My family had abandoned me, but in doing so, they had unwittingly set me free to create a life and legacy entirely my own. The family I built around me, now chosen, not given, was stronger and more authentic than anything I had known before. In the end, taking my family to court wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, standing in my truth, and closing one chapter so that new ones could begin. The scared 17-year-old girl who once cried herself to sleep, wondering why she wasn't worth keeping, could finally rest. In her place stood a woman who knew with bone-deep certainty that she had always been worth fighting for. Have you ever been abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect you? If you have, I hope my story helps you see that their actions reflect their limitations, not your worth. Building a new life after betrayal isn't easy, but it's possible. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled the situation with my family? Would you have taken them to court or found another path to closure? If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and transformation. Remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey, whatever challenges you may face.